Hi friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. Today I am going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of November, and there are quite a few of them. Quite a few. I feel like I'm pretty ragged right now. It's the end of the day, Tuesday. I was spoiled with a very light schedule in the month of November, and now I am working almost full time with the baby. My back is sore. My hair is crazy. I'm in a hoodie. I just feel pretty ratty, but I wanted to get this filmed so that I can edit it while baby is napping tomorrow and get it up for you, because we are now into December and I'm ready to switch gears, but I have this very big stack of books to talk about. So I'm going to start with two books that I DNF'd. I was in a roll with DNFing lately. I think I DNF'd 3 in October and now 2 in November. Who even am I? I don't think I did 5 the whole rest of the year. But here we have it. The first one I DNF'd is Dragonfly by Leila Meacham. This was on my November TBR. I picked it off my recommendations card as kind of an intimidating read. It is a chunker, first of all, World War II historical fiction. And I know Lindsay from Lindsay's Little Library really loves it. The problem I was having with it is that there are 5 different characters that we follow, 5 people chosen to become a part of this spy network. And I could not keep them straight. And I honestly just didn't care about their characters. I don't remember how far I made it in, maybe 30-ish percent, 40%. And I just decided I really didn't care. I kept I was listening to it on audio, and maybe that was the problem. Maybe if I was reading it in print, it would have gone better for me. But I didn't care. So this is going on my Pango pile. I don't want to read it right now. Maybe someday I'll come back to it, but I don't think so. The second one I'm a little sad about because this is my Patreon recommendation for the month of November. This is a book that I picked out of the cup. One of you lovely patrons recommended this to me. It's Long Island by Colm Tobin. I heard this pronounced Colm Tobin. I think I'm saying it wrong. Tobin. I think maybe this I is almost silent. Column. Interesting. Anyways, this is a sequel to Brooklyn. And as I was listening to this, I remember being frustrated with the main character in Brooklyn. I forget her name. Ellis. I don't know how to say it. It's Irish. Eilis. And this continues her story from the first book, so I don't want to say too much because it would be spoilery. I just remember not liking her character and some of the choices that she made in the first book, and it felt like we were going down that same road in this one. Although it was probably somewhat realistic, it also felt like she was just so selfish and focused on the wrong things, and it looked like we were headed towards an infidelity situation in this book. I don't know if that's where it was going to go because I DNF'd it before we got there, but that's similar to what happened in the first book. So I just decided I'm not going to finish this one. So I'm really sorry, Maria, DNFing that one as well. Well, I did. I DNF'd it. Then I've kind of divided up my stack. So I have here 4 books that were part of a read-along or Patreon, another Patreon recommendation. I'll do Patreon first. So my Patreon book club for the month of November was Mexicid by Pedro Martin. I wasn't sure if I was going to rate this. I think I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, 3 stars, something along those lines. This is a graphic memoir. The graphics are fantastic. And I saw an interview with Pedro Martin, and he's just so talented, and he uses different styles for different parts of this story. We follow him as a kid, and his family, his huge Mexican-American family, travels to Mexico to pick up his abuelo, his grandfather, to bring his grandfather back to live in California with them. Big family road trip in a Winnebago. The older kids are driving a pickup truck. A lot of it felt nostalgic to me because my family took a lot of road trips when I was little. So I could just relate to some of it. I feel like a middle grade boy would love this book because he was a middle grade boy when he was writing this. And so there are a handful of scenes that are a little on the gross side, a little on the extreme side of things. As he learns more and more about his abuelo, he imagines him as this larger than life comic book character. So he illustrates those pages as he's hearing these stories about his grandpa's life. And he just imagines him as a superhero. And Pedro himself loved superheroes when he was a kid. Everyone else's family teases him about his dolls. So there's a lot in here that was really good and a lot of fun. to read about, but ultimately I felt disconnected from the story. I didn't ultimately care. And that's something that I really need in my books to give them better ratings, but it's also his life and I'm not the target audience. So there's that to consider as well. It did win a Newbery Honor in 2024. So I'm glad that I read it. I'm probably going to put this one on Pango though too. I don't need to keep it on my shelves. And then the other patron recommendation that I read in November, finally finished in November, I should say. I started this quite a while ago. It's a book of poetry called Wild Hope by Donna Ashworth. Can you see all the little pages that I tabbed? I actually didn't tab like the first 90 pages because I read that a long time ago. And then in November, I read the rest of it. There are a lot of really beautiful poems in here. I don't know how to rate a book of poetry because not all of them were great, but there were a lot of really beautiful poems. I'm going to just read one for you. And I just kind of opened up to this one. I just picked one tab that I had. This is called Hang On. It's just this bit here. There are times, and there will be more, when answers are simply not within reach, and that's okay. They're not supposed to be. I think these times are for practicing hope, for believing, for surrendering to the knowing that a plan will emerge, that a path will appear, that a way through will simply transpire given space and time to form, that life will move on, placing you exactly where you're supposed to be, just as the ocean will always deliver the message in a bottle to a beach. Sometimes we are not supposed to know, we are supposed to believe, to hope, to hang on. Just hang on, my friends, hang on. There are so many that are beautiful in this book. I'm really thankful to Lee for recommending it to me. It did have a lot that was really poignant and like timely as I grieved the loss of my brother this year. So I think that this is a beautiful book of poetry. If you're not normally a poetry reader like me, there are a lot in here that are very accessible and very meaningful. So I'm so glad that I read that, but I'm not giving it a rating, I don't think. Then I had Middle Grade March. Our final book club book for 2024 was Simon Sort of Says by Erin Bow. This one won a Newbery Honor as well as the National Book Award long list. I loved this book. I think I had different expectations going in. I thought it was going to be a little more sci-fi. It's not. It's straight contemporary about this boy and his family who moved to, I forget what they call it now. It's like a quiet town because of the work that they're doing with space, satellites and things, trying to find aliens. There's like no cell anything, no Wi-Fi, no cell service, no computers, no nothing in this town, no telephone wires, like nothing in this town. It's all just a quiet zone, dead zone. I forget what they call it. Quiet zone, and the National Quiet Zone, where the internet is banned so radio astronomers can listen for signs of life in space. So Simon and his family moved there because he is the lone survivor of a school shooting of his classroom in their previous town. He is dealing with a ton of trauma, as can be expected. And this book talks about how that trauma affects him and the people around him. He is befriended by a young lady who has, who's on the autistic spectrum and is lovely. Agate is her name, and she's part of a big family, and she just calls it like it is. And she's decided Simon is going to be her friend, and their friendship is really beautiful, as well as a third kid that is involved in this friendship. They have a plan to kind of prank the astronomers, and through it all, it's really about Simon deciding when and how to share his truth with the people in this new town. Nobody knows. They don't have internet. They don't have access really to the outside world on a daily basis. And so he comes there, and he's given a little break, a little respite from everybody knowing and having thoughts about what he's experienced all around him. It was really heartwarming, and yeah, the friendship was definitely my best part. I absolutely loved his parents, and I thought that there was quirky and funny parts as well, which definitely were needed because it was such a heavy, it was a heavy topic. I really loved this. It was so good. It was so good. The final read-along that I did in the month of November was Adorning the Dark by Andrew Peterson. This was for my Christian nonfiction read-alongs that I do here on my channel. Quarterly, I will be continuing that in 2025. I'm open to hearing suggestions of books that you would like to do together. But we read Adorning the Dark in November, and unfortunately, this was my least favorite of the year of our read-alongs. I really didn't care for this book at all. I think I'm giving it 2.5 to 3 stars. There were definitely things that I liked about it here and there. It was way more memoir than what I was expecting. I thought Thoughts on Community Calling and the Mystery of Making was going to be a little more Christian living, like practical, like how to walk out being a light in the darkness with whatever creative outlet you have. This is more about Andrew Peterson, who is a Christian singer, songwriter, and as well as an author. And he talks mostly about his music career, a little bit about the writing as well, but mostly about his music career. It was very nostalgic for me as somebody who has been a Christian almost my whole life and grew up was in college in the 90s. And a lot of his influences and contemporary artists that he's talking about in here were people that I listened to. Caedmon's Call, Bebo Norman, Jill Phillips. All of these authors are singer-songwriters. Rich Mullins were people that I listened to when I was younger. And so it was very nostalgic in that way. And there were little nuggets here and there that I really liked. But I think going in with a different expectation did me a disservice. And I found a lot of it to be boring. But again, it's a memoir. So how do you rate that? It's his life. It's his story. It just wasn't what I was expecting. And it was wonderful to chat with the ladies who joined me on our lives and the handful of people in the comments as well. And I know other people liked it better than I did. I just ended up not really loving it. So this is also going to go on my pickle pile. The next 4 books that I have to talk about are ones that I've already completed for Bucket-Listathon, which is a readathon that I'm participating in that started November 15th and goes till December 15th. So we're right in the midst of it right now. And I finished prompt 3, 4, 5, and 10 of the 10 books that I chose. So I still have 6 more to go. I don't think that's going to happen. But here are the ones that I have completed. For prompt number 3, I got a favorite author. And so I chose Frederick Bachman and I read The Deal of a Lifetime. And this brings me current. I think there's one more short story that I have on my Kindle that I can read. And then he has a new book coming out in the new year. But this brings me current with all of his books that are published right now, except for that short story, which is probably a novella like this, because honestly, this I listened to and was done in 30 minutes or so by speeding up the audio. I should have read it though, because there are color illustrations in here, which is a lot of fun. I can't really tell you much about the story because it is so short. It does pack a bit of a punch, and we follow a man who was very focused on his career and earning a lot of money. And his son, who is pretty estranged with him, like they don't get on very well because the dad was so focused on a different aspect of life. And now he's dealing with an illness and kind of coming face to face with the choices that he has made in his life. So that's basically the story of it. In true Frederick Bachman style, it had me tearing up a little bit. It was not my favorite of Bachman's works, but I'm glad that I read it because I want to read him to 0. And I'm very, very, very close. For prompt number 4, I had a backlist book, and it had been a year or 2 since I've read a Susanna Kearsley, so I picked up Mariana, and I loved it. I loved it so much. So Susanna Kearsley always plays with time in her novels. In this one, we follow Julia, who, when she's young on a family trip, she sees this little gray cottage, stone cottage. She's like, that's my house. And has always kind of had this house in her mind. And so when she gets older, she comes into some money and she's like, you know what? I'm going to go look into that house. And she does. And she buys that house and she lives in this house and she gets to know the people in the town. But the house and the town are kind of like, she starts to have these memories and these experiences where she kind of blacks out, but she kind of is living this life of Mariana. And I'm not going to really tell you how it all comes together, but it is haunting. It was like perfect fall time read. There's a beautiful little romance in here. There was a twist at the end that I was not prepared for. I mean, I had thoughts about it, but then I was thinking a different way. And then it came back. I'm like, oh, it was that actually. I just love Susanna Kearsley's writing. She just envelops me in her story and in the setting. And I just want to go there. I want to go to this Scottish village. Is it Scotland, England? I don't know. I just want to go there, walk along the moors and along the water and see the castle. Like, it just was so atmospheric. And I love that about Susanna Kearsley's writing, and she can tell a good tale. Love this. We'll definitely read more Susanna Kearsley. I don't know when, but I will continue to read her because I love her. Then for prompt number 5, I had finish a series. And so on my drive up to New York for Thanksgiving, I found the audio of The Wild Robot Protects by Peter Brown. This is a lovely story. Honestly, though, it's my least favorite of the trilogy. I love, love, love book 1, and book 2 was okay. And then this one is my least favorite. But in this one, there is a evil tide, poison tide. Poison tide? I mean, I should remember because they talked about it over and over and over and over. Poison tide. I feel like that phrase, poison tide, was repeated way too many times. There's a poison tide that is starting to threaten the island. And so Roz is determined to figure out where it's coming from, how to stop it so she can protect her island. So she travels through the ocean, meets all kinds of ocean creatures. If you're somebody who loves octopuses and sharks and sea urchins, like all kinds of sea creatures she meets along the way and talks to along the way, as she goes to try to figure out how to find the source of this poison tide and how to stop it. So we're not as much on the island, which is why I think I didn't like it as much as the others. I love the characters and the found family that's on the island that we meet in book 1. So this one was a lot more of meeting other creatures. It was super creative and fun, but I'm just giving it 3.5 stars. I did listen to it. I need to look through though and take a gander at some more of these gorgeous illustrations that are all the way through because they're beautiful. As a whole, I love the series. I'm glad that I finished it. It was a sweet, fun read to read in my car ride. And then the other Bucket-Listathon book that I completed was prompt 10, which was just pick a corner. And I landed on physical TBR, which was my place that I started. So half of my books, or 80% of my books or something like that, need to be from my physical TBR. All 3 of these are on my physical TBR, as is this one. I finally listened to The Lost Ticket by Freya Sampson. This book, I love this book so much. And I knew that I would. I had a feeling I was gonna. Amanda gifted it to me for Christmas book exchange either last year or the year before. And she loved it. And then in the comments, when I put this on multiple TBRs, so many of you said, you're going to love that book. And you were right. It was lovely. So in this book, we follow Libby, who's in London, riding the bus one day. She meets Frank. She's kind of had a recent breakup. Frank is this older man who thinks Libby is somebody else. She's got this bright red hair, and he, in a moment of kind of dementia, getting old, he thinks that she's someone else. And so Frank and Libby meet on the bus a couple different times, and then she starts to learn Frank's story, where he met someone on the bus when he was a young lad, missed connection, and has been riding the bus ever since, hoping to find this woman that he met years and years and years ago. Libby decides she's going to help him. She's going to make posters. She's going to do what she can to help Frank find this missed love of his life, the one that got away. And through the course of this all, Frank's carer gets involved, other people get involved, and there's this own little found family within these characters on the bus. It's just heartwarming and sweet and heart-wrenching at times. Are they going to find her? Frank is getting old and he's kind of ill. There's so many elements to this, and it was just a hug of a book by the end. I love how it all came together. I absolutely love this book. I think I gave it 5 stars. Did I give it 5 stars? I might have. It was so good. It was so good. And then I have 3 books that were just on my November TBR. I think these 2 were from Flip and Roll, and this is just Nonfiction November. I might have got this on Flip and Roll too. I didn't go back and look, to be honest. I'll start with the nonfiction. The only nonfiction that I actually finished, I read Mexicid. That's nonfiction. I read Wild Hope. That's poetry. That's nonfiction. And then I completed Loving versus Virginia. I'm still not done with the other 2 nonfiction I'm reading. This is by Patricia Harubi Powell. Fabulous. It's told in verse, and there are illustrations. Of course, I'm not seeing any right now. Here we go. It's a story of Richard and Mildred and the case that becomes Loving versus Virginia. The court case, because Richard is white and Mildred is black, and that was illegal for them to be in a relationship and at the time. So we start when they're quite young and how they meet, the beginning of their relationship, and how they have to sneak around a little bit, and then they sneak off to go get married. And then from the point where it becomes a court case, then things get a little bit more intense. But their love all the way through is beautiful. It was super interesting. I really loved it. I'm so thankful that I found this at my library book sale for $3. Then the other two from my November TBR, I did read Beyond the Bright Sea, which won the Scott Odell Award. This is a middle grade by Lauren Wolk, who's an author that I have read before and really enjoyed. And I liked this one too. I don't think it's my favorite of her books, but it was a sweet story. Another found family situation, which is a favorite of mine. So we follow this man named Osh, who lives kind of an isolated life on this island off the coast of Massachusetts. So we're talking cold New England. And one day a boat washes the shore, and there's a newborn baby in it, days old maybe. And so Osh takes this baby, and he's lived by himself for so long, but he just can't leave this baby to die or whatever. So he does what he can to find food, milk, has to talk to a neighbor, has to go into town. He's got to do what he's got to do to save this baby's life. And then decides that he loves this baby and he's going to raise this baby. So it's almost an adoption story, unofficial adoption story. But when Crow, the little girl, when she gets older, she of course has questions about where did she come from and how did she end up on the island. And there's a neighbor, Maggie, who's also very involved in their lives. The historical part of this is that another island off the coast of Massachusetts, back in the whatevers, 1950s, 40s, I don't know when this takes place. I think it's even earlier than that, maybe. Anyways, there was a leper colony that was put on this other island nearby to the island where Osh and Crow live. Federal government ended up moving it down south, but for a long time there was this island and it was isolated. People who were diagnosed with leprosy or caught leprosy or whatever lived on this island. So in Crow's life, many people just assume and think that she came from that leper colony. Whether she did or not, you're going to have to read the book. But they kind of treat her as though she were a leper, and they don't touch her. They don't let her open doors. Like, they don't let her touch anything or go near her. And she's always kind of felt very, very isolated, other than her friendship with Maggie, the neighbor nearby, and Osh, her adoptive father. There's also kind of this storyline about a pirate treasure that's potentially on this island where the leper colony was. And so that is a big part of the story as well. I just really enjoyed this. I liked how it all came together. I liked the historical elements of it, and I liked the found family elements of it too. I think I ended up giving it 4 stars, maybe. Honestly, I never remember my ratings by the end of the month. I read too many things. The other hug of a book that I read while I was at home at my mom's, and I did read this one in print, and it's a pretty quick read, but I read Sipsworth by Simon Van Buie. Another book that many of you said that I was going to love, and you were right. This is a lovely, lovely story about an older woman named Helen who's kind of lonely at the end of her life. Not at the end of her life. She's in her 80s maybe. Just lives her own quiet life. The first few chapters are very, very quiet. Just we're kind of hearing her thought process as she goes through her days. She's just feeling alone and kind of set in her ways of what shows she watches and what food she makes. But then one day, her neighbor brings out this big fish aquarium, puts it out near the trash, and she's like, I wonder what all that could be. So she grabs it in the middle of the night and brings it into her house, cleans everything up, but inside the fish tank in a box was a little mouse. Finding that mouse changes the trajectory of Helen's life, and she goes to the hardware store, starts talking with a guy there about what she could do about this mouse. She talks to different vets. Along the way, you learn more and more about Helen and her story and her memories as she's remembering things. It's just a beautiful book. It's a quiet book. It's kind of slow paced. Not a ton happens, but the relationships that build, just the way that Helen's life is unfolded for us, it's just beautiful. I just wanted to hug it when I was done. It just brought me joy, and it was exactly what I needed for Thanksgiving weekend. It was quiet. It was lovely. 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I just loved it. It was so good. Then I have just a couple randoms. One that I read at the very beginning of the month, like my first read, I think, of November, was Worst Case Scenario by TJ Newman. I love TJ Newman. I will read anything she puts out. This was another fantastic read. In this one, a plane crashes into a nuclear power plant in the Midwest. There's a medical situation. The pilot can't fly the plane. It crashes. And so we follow this town and their emergency procedures as they try to figure out how to prevent like a nuclear explosion ultimately. So we follow all these pockets of people as they try to solve things to make this disaster not even more of a disaster. Drowning is still, I believe, my favorite, and then Falling, and then Worst Case Scenario. I think in this one, the difference between the other two and this one is that the other two had like a main character and situation that we were following. And in this one, there was a lot of different pockets of things. However, what TJ Newman does so well is make me care. There was one father-son storyline that I was weeping. I was weeping at one part. It just definitely got to my heartstrings. She can tell a good tale. It was edge of your seat. What's going to happen? Is this power plant going to explode? Like, are they going to be able to save the town, the state? Like, are they going to be able to stop what needs to be stopped and prevent what needs to be prevented? Like, it was intense. It was intense, and it was beautifully written, and I cried. Just like I did in both of the other ones, which you don't expect from this type of a plane crash kind of thrillery book. But she did it. She did it again. Nailed it. And then I have 3 books that I listened to in the car, along with The Lost Ticket and Wild Robot. Those were audiobooks that I listened to on my drive as well. I'll end with the 2 Christmassy ones. But this one is one more from my NetGalley. This is a Christian fiction by Robin Lee Hatcher. It's called I'll Be Seeing You. This is one of those historical fiction that's dual timeline. And we follow a college student who has this project for her history class where she's got to interview an elderly person. So she talks to her grandmother, who is in the other storyline, one of the main characters from the other storyline. Their lives kind of parallel each other a little bit. We learn about Daisy and her sister Lillian, I believe, during World War II. Daisy is the younger sister, falls in love with her sister's boyfriend. Things take a turn. She ends up having to marry the neighbor next door. So we just kind of follow her. And the war is really just a backdrop to what's going on. I mean, it's definitely a part of the story because some of the characters go off to war. Some of the other characters make changes in their lives because of the war. But really it's about Daisy and Lillian and Tom and their family. In the present day, Brianna, who is faced with some of the same situations that her grandmother was ultimately. There is a lot of faith content in here, and I thought it was done really well. I thought it was a lot of conversation about when is lying okay? Is lying okay? I mean, it's one of the 10 commandments. Lying is something we're not supposed to do, but is it ever okay to lie? That was a conversation in here. And just trusting God with our lives. Like, ultimately, a lot of faith issues that we all face were faced by these characters, and it was done in a really beautiful way, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm glad that I read that one. It's on my NetGalley, so it's one more NetGalley review that I need to write. And finally, I did listen to 2 Christmas books, one on the way up to New York and one on the way back. One of them I liked, and one of them was just kind of okay. Ultimately, I find Christmas romance books forgettable. They're fun for the moment. They're fun for the season, but do I really remember them? Nope. The first one that I listened to on the way up for Thanksgiving was The Christmas Crush by Noelle Douglas. And this had definite You've Got Mail vibes, not in the letter writing back and forth, but in the fact that there is a man who owns a bakery in a small town, a cookie shop in particular. It's been a family business for generations. And then into town comes this like crumble cookie, like this big cookie conglomerate. The new company is getting some flack from the town. So the big business guy says, you need to go to the town and smooth things over. So this woman goes to the town to try to smooth things over for this big cookie shop. Of course, sparks fly between these two. Very Christmassy, Christmas cookies in particular. And it was a very low spice. There's a couple fade to black, like 2 fade to black scenes, but no details, mostly just kissing on page. And it was a sweet story. I enjoyed it. The other Christmas book that I listened to was It Happened One Christmas, and this is by Chantel Gurton. And this one is another small town Christmas story where this movie director who's directing a screenplay of a Christmas movie that she wrote based on an experience that she had in this particular small town when she was a kid. Things never had kind of gone south. She doesn't really love Christmas because this one Christmas was just so beautiful with her family, and then her parents ended up splitting up and have gotten distant and all that. But so she wants to try to recapture this moment, and so she has to go to this small town to get permissions from all of the businesses in the town itself to film her movie in the small town. Well, the mayor of the town is kind of a grumpy dude, and he is convinced that allowing these big businesses in, all these tourists, would not be good for his town. And so he says, no way, you cannot do it. And so she's trying to convince him. He's saying no. He's very icy towards her. But then there's a surprise ice storm that strands these two together. There's a kind of like comedy of errors. There are a couple scenes that are just a little bit ridiculous. But then they get trapped and they have to go like walk through the snow to this cabin, and she's only wearing Uggs, and there's just all of these ridiculous things that happen. And of course, sparks start to fly once they're trapped and stranded in the storm in this cabin. This one was a little bit more steamy. There was only one scene though, and I was able to kind of skip through. The rest of it was not at all. It was just one scene. It was okay. It was fine. Maybe 3.5 stars for The Christmas Crush, and then 3 stars for It Happened One Christmas. Ultimately forgettable, both of them. Not like must read Christmas books, but fun for a car ride. And that is the end of my November wrap up. I'm not even going to try to hold all these books up. I would love to chat with you down below about any of the books that I mentioned today, or any of your favorite reads from the month of November. I hope that you're enjoying what you're reading as we're starting in December. And that is going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, spending a few minutes of your time with me. If you've made it this far and you just want to let me know that you were here, go ahead and put a little mouse emoji for Sipsworth, which was probably my favorite read of the month. This and The Lost Ticket. They're tied. But yeah, go ahead and put a little mouse emoji just to let me know that you're here. And I look forward to chatting with you down in the comments, and I'll talk to you in another video very soon. Bye.